Hello, it's Scott Manley here. It's January 21st. It's time for another batch of Deep Space Updates. On the 5th of January, we had the Kuaizhou 1A rocket launching out of China carrying the Tianmu 15 to 18 satellites. These are meteorology satellites going into sun-synchronous orbit as part of a larger constellation. 7th of January, Falcon 9 launched 23 Starlink satellites from Cape Canaveral, a slick 40. This is Group 6-35. And on the 8th of January, we have our first major launch of this episode. We have Vulcan Centaur making their debut onto the international launch scene, carrying the Peregrine lander as its primary payload. And the Peregrine lander was part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services mission built by Astrobotic. It was supposed to take a set of payloads, NASA experiments, to the moon. Two of the experiments it carried were Iris and Colmena, which are rovers which would have been deployed on the surface. But yeah, let's talk about the launch first. So, Vulcan Centaur, ULA's new rocket, the one which will ultimately replace Atlas and Delta, the first thing that they have built in-house. It is, well, it's a Methalox first stage, hydrogen second stage, and then it can have a number of large solid boosters to help it get off the ground. And it operated spectacularly well. It was a beautiful launch, and there are some amazing photos. I love some, like, first of all, yeah, you've got the close-ups, like John Krause's amazing close-ups showing those beautiful blue Mach diamonds was absolutely, oh, perfect. But then you have people just a lot further away taking these nice time-lapse or, you know, like long exposure images, and you can see the rocket trail go from white to this deep blue as this, you know, the SRBs come off of it. So anyway, successful launch, placed the spacecraft into its target orbit. And unfortunately, Peregrine had a bit of a problem. We can talk about that later. On the 9th of January, we had Long March 2C launching out of Xichang. This was carrying the Einstein probe, which is an X-ray telescope built by China in collaboration with the European Space Agency. So this is like a 1,500 kilogram payload, and it operates in like a 600 kilometer, 29 degree inclination orbit. It carries two telescopes. First of all is the Wide Field X-ray telescope, which uses a lobster eye imaging system. That's where you have a lot of channels that focus the light down. Because X-rays, you know, you can't reflect them with traditional mirrors. You can only use grazing incident optics. So they actually have lots of these lobster eye telescopes to cover 360 degrees of the sky. And with this, the spacecraft can effectively scan the entire sky in 5 hours. And then, if there are transient sources, it can then follow up with the follow-up X-ray telescope, a much more conventional telescope which uses grazing incidence optics to image parts of the sky. So this is going to be a mission that operates for several years, Europe and China working on this together. 11th of January, another Kuaizhou 1A carrying the Tianxing 1 satellite, number 2, launched from Jiquan. Again, all, you know, solid 4-stage rocket carrying you know, payloads. This is for space environment sensing, so I think it's going to be looking at you know, environment in low Earth orbit, radiation, magnetic fields, that kind of thing. But more interestingly, on the 11th of January, Gravity 1 made its debut. This is another new rocket out of China. And, well, boy, this is one of the weirdest looking rockets. So again, this is a rocket that is built out of, you know, not so much off the shelf, but they bought these motors from the Chinese government, solid rocket motors, and they assemble them into a rocket. This one has, like, a core, which is a large booster, and then they have 4 of these strapped onto the side. So it creates the look of this short, stubby, you know, thing with boosters that peel off. It's definitely an odd-looking rocket. They launched it off a ship in the Yellow Sea. And so anyway, this solid rocket launcher, it can carry 6.5 tons into low Earth orbit, making it the most capable of these all-solid launch vehicles. I think it's like twice the payload of any of its near competitors. So that was a success. The payload it carried was a spacecraft called Yunya, numbers 18 through 20, which I believe are meteorology satellites. On the 12th of January, Japan's H-2A launched, carrying the IGS Optical 8 payload, which is a reconnaissance satellite. Basically, you're doing military reconnaissance. It's gone into a sun-synchronous orbit, and Japan started launching reconnaissance satellites because it's primarily interested in North Korea, which frequently launches missiles over Japan. 14th of January, we had Falcon 9 launching out of Vandenberg. That had been delayed several times because we've been having lousy weather on the west coast. 15th, we had another Starlink launch out of the Capes from Slick 40. 17th of January, we had a Long March 7, that's of course cryogenic, I believe, carrying Tianzhou 7, or Tianzhou, I guess, to the Chinese space station. So this is a it's a logistics mission carrying cargo. I believe it's also carrying the Nanjing satellite, which is an educational satellite for one of the China's universities. 18th of January, Falcon 9 carrying Axiom 3, carrying a Dragon with the crew of Michael Lopez Alegria, Marcus Vont from Sweden, Alper Gervacci from Turkey, and Walter Villade from Italy. And many were saying, oh, this is the first all-European Dragon mission. So, sort of, because technically Turkey actually spans two continents. The Bosphorus Straits, and north of it is considered Europe, south of the Bosphorus, that's considered part of Asia. And I believe Alper was actually born south of it, so technically he's Asian, even though Turkey is sort of European. Michael Lopez, he was born in Spain, moved to the US and became a US citizen, and that's how he became a NASA astronaut. But his birthplace is in Europe. So anyway, I'm going to say technically Alpert wasn't born in Europe, but I can say that all 4 astronauts on this flight come from nations which have won the Eurovision Song Contest. So there is that. And Sweden, of course, they won it more than anyone else. So that means that Marcus is really the king of this mission. So yeah, this is a 14-day commercial launch to the International Space Station. They'll be doing, of course, various scientific stuff for their nations. It is interesting that Marcus is actually an ESA astronaut. He's selected as such, but Sweden is paying to launch him on this private mission, rather than, say, contributing to the European Space Agency and then hoping indirectly to have him launch at some point. So I'm seeing a lot more of this. Governments that are paying for their crew to fly to the space station rather than, say, contributing to ESA and hoping to get some benefit from that. Of course, the astronauts that go with ESA, they spend 6 months on the station rather than 2 weeks. And then on the 20th, we had a new one, the Qaem 100, launched out of Iran by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, carrying the Soraya satellite, which is a communications experimental satellite of some sort, launching out of Sharud Space Center. It has gone into a 750-kilometer orbit, 65-degree inclination, and notably, the Qaem 100 is now the most powerful rocket Iran has. It is all solid rocket motors, and it is much more closely aligned with what you might find from expect from a ballistic missile. This is a much more capable launch vehicle and something that I'm hoping remains for peaceful use. That would be very nice. But yes, moving onwards, the last couple of weeks, well, there was a big thing for me. I spent last weekend out in Austin, Texas at Everyday Astronauts Astro Awards. He invited me out in just before December. He said, wouldn't it be cool if you just turned up to the pre-party and then played a secret DJ set in a mask? And my wife said, that sounds great, but let's not do the mask. And thankfully, I don't know where the mask thing was dropped, but I am happy that I got to go out and relive my DJ career days. I brought about 15 tracks that were all sequenced with space-themed footage, and it was so much fun. I mean, sure, the second to last track was Katy Perry's Fireworks, which was all synchronized to rockets exploding. We also had, Goldfrapp, a bit of DJ Shadow, and then we went, of course, some deep techno, like German techno. We had some left field. We had some disco from Sarah Brightman, who you might think, oh, that's a little odd, but she actually did train to be a cosmonaut, although she flubbed out of the training at some point and never flew. And of course, ended with high contrast, days go by, people on shoulders, club goes wild. I love it. Yeah, so the next day we actually had the Astro Awards ceremony. I got to talk with a lot of cool people. And got to sit up on stage as part of a panel with like Firefly and SpaceX and Relativity, which was quite intimidating because I would be the first person to get the question, and sometimes I didn't have an answer right away. It was definitely an interesting weekend, but unfortunately what happened was we then had this massive polar vortex blow down over the middle of the country and everything froze. And while Texas didn't have it that bad, it was bad enough that my flight that was back through Dallas was cancelled, like literally an hour after, before it was supposed to go. And then we were rescheduled for like 2 days later to the wrong airport. We eventually sorted that out, but I did end up with like a spare day in Texas. And thankfully, Firefly, they came through for me and they were like, hey, come on, we'll take you out and give you a tour of everything. And I got to see their manufacturing facilities. I got to see the hive, got to see their valvery. It's interesting. I did get to go out and see their test facilities next to their, their test stand, which has been testing the Miranda engine. And while I can't tell you anything about it, I can tell you that I learned a lot when I was there. I got to see their new carbon fiber manufacturing facility. They've got the new wider rings that they're going to have for the tanks that are required for the Miranda launch vehicle, which is, of course, is going to be the first stage of the Antares 330, which is the replacement for the current Cygnus launch vehicle. That's going to be great for Firefly. I really look forward to spending more time with them, and maybe they can help me answer some questions. But thanks for that. It was truly an amazing way to spend the day. So anyway, yeah, Astro Awards, great meeting all of you. Took a million selfies. Thanks for everything. Thanks for the cool people that wanted to talk to me and help me out. And yeah, I am humbled. I am humbled. Thanks very much. But anyway, moving onwards, we have in space, India's Aditya spacecraft finally reached its target location at the L1 point between the Earth and the Sun. It's going to be studying the Sun using a number of indigenously developed instruments, looking at the heliosphere and other parts of the Sun, hoping to get some good science out of that. NASA and the UAE announced a collaboration whereby the UAE will develop and deliver the crew and science airlock for Lunar Gateway. So they're going to be basically putting hardware in orbit around the moon. This is an airlock which will allow experiments to be placed on the outside and, of course, will allow crew to perform EVA. Now, it's notable that it was originally thought that this would be provided by Roscosmos, but back in 2021, Dmitry Rogozin pulled out, saying that the thing was too US-centric, and of course, it's probably a good thing in the long run because that would never have worked with the current situation in Ukraine. Now, while UAE are paying for it and largely being heavily involved